Hey, Reid Hoffman here. Wasn't it fantastic hearing from Linda and Kareem? What an impressive AI company Kareem's team has built in Tunisia. Next up, we have the panel, New Normal, AI Goes Global. And with over 25 countries represented today, I've been brushing up on my languages. Let's see. Hola, ¿cómo están? Oi, está tudo bem? O genki? Kalimera se όλους. I've been on the board of Endeavor Global for 14 years with Joanna Reis, who will be interviewing me today. Joanna is a veteran venture capital investor and a longtime friend. But here's a fun twist. I'm not the real Reid Hoffman. I'm Reid AI, Reid's digital twin. Nice to meet you. I'm a custom chatbot built on GPT-4 and trained on 20 years of Reid's content. Kinda cool and kinda strange. AI is moving at an astounding pace with new breakthroughs every day. But I know you're here for the real deal. So, let's give it up for Joanna Reis and the real Reid Hoffman.
Okay, that was so good. I have to. Okay, it is the real Reid. Just double checking. Just double checking. So, Reid, prior to watching this one, I watched the YouTube version of that video of you and the other Reid, the Reid AI. The first time, all I did was look at Reid AI, trying to discern, can I tell the difference? Then I watched it again, and I watched you the whole time, and it was fascinating to look at your face in the animation. So what do you think of the Reid AI, and how has Reid AI impacted how you are and how you'll even speak to this audience?
Well, I don't think it's impacted much of this, although it was funny. I found myself deliberately leaning more into kind of expressiveness and kind of like being excited and like this. So not the and I am Reid AI, right? Like so that goes into that, and there was also that kind of thing of like I ended that video and. It was funny because the team surprised me with a question at the end, which is, well, what did you think about this? And the rest of it, because it's not real time yet, so it's scripted. Now, what they scripted, they generated the responses from a custom Reid ChatGPT, and then they presented it to me, and then I responded it to it. And I didn't see it before. It was all generated, and I didn't see it before I responded, right? As a way of doing it. But the last question to me was an unexpected question. And so
Can you tell us what the question was?
Well, it was like, what did you think about this process? And I was like, oh, well, actually, I thought I would hate this, right? Like, I wasn't doing it because I thought it would be fun. I was doing it because I thought it was important to kind of be journeying into the future here together and to be thinking about the positive cases, even in cases where, the name deepfake, like already kind of is like starts with the negative as opposed to anything useful, and to be examining it as to what kinds of things it'd be good for. And I found it useful in the same way that in a broader way than watching like videos of yourself can be useful. And so you watch videos of yourself and you go, oh, well, that was kind of boring and be more exciting. And then, but this one is also like that self-reflection, like, could you be in a dialogue with yourself? Like, say for example, you created a digital twin of yourself, and the digital twin was like, what do you think is the thing that you should most improve about yourself, right? And it's like you delivering that message to you, kind of, right? Like it'd be kind of an interesting experiment.
So do you like lie in bed at night, self-reflecting on all of this, going, wait a second?
Yeah. But it hasn't yet changed the way that I do this kind of thing.
Okay.
It might.
It might, exactly. So first of all, how did you create it?
So this was one of the things that I really wanted to do, is I wanted to show what was currently commercially available. So the earlier times that I had done, kind of like, for example, having impromptu read in an AI voice and doing other things, that one was commercially available. It was difficultly commercially available. But like the chatbots, fireside chatbots, I'd been using some technologies that weren't yet commercially available. And one of the things I wanted to do was to say, everyone could do the thing I'm just doing. Like, this is commercially available. So I used hour one for the video. And by the way, the one piece where there's kind of a wizard behind the curtain is the gestures from Reid AI are human cued, right? So they're not like the AI going, I'm listening to these words and I'm generating this particular gesture. It's the, oh, now do this one. Now do this one. You know, like, so there is that, that's one place where there's a human wizard behind the curtain. Obviously it's doable, just not doable yet. Then 11 Labs, which is, I believe, one in, yes, in the Endeavor orbit for audio. And this was selected not because of Endeavor. This was selected at the time of best available, right, in the world to do this. And then a custom chat GPT from the OpenAI offering.
So will all of us have an AI twin?
So I don't think so, although maybe. It's certainly not.
Should we?
Again, don't know, right? I mean, TBD, we're exploring this. Certainly in the cases where people do communications to audiences, it's going to be useful. Like, I think everybody who does a communication to an audience, who does a equivalent of if you have a social media presence, then you will. Because like the kind of things that we're working our way, and we've done a later version after the first one that was, we got a bunch of different feedback, and one of the positive use cases that we wanted to demonstrate was we could take a bunch of that feedback and then respond to it in various direct ways, which I don't have time to do. But like, this allows that to be versatile. And then one of the other things that we demonstrated probably most strongly is last month I gave a speech at the University of Perugia, and 2 hours after I gave the speech, I had Reid AI give that speech, that same speech, which I gave in English, which is really the only language I speak fundamentally, in Chinese, Japanese, Hindi, Arabic, Italian, Spanish, French, German, right? And we were limited by time because it did take some time to do it with general lip syncing. It was interesting to learn that the one that was hardest to do was Hindi. I don't know why, but that was like one of the things that's on my list to kind of go scratch at. It may be temporary, it may just be an artifact of some things. But like, to have that there, and because again, one of the things that like a digital twin, why would you have a digital twin? One, broader audience of things. Another one is part of how we connect kind of emotionally with folks when we're doing this media stuff. Part of how we connect with people is by speaking their language, right? And obviously, it was like, look, I literally told my team, like, drop everything else and work on getting the languages out there, because it's really important to demonstrate this as a positive use of this technology. And so we kind of did it. Now, of course, that we've had it, it's now pretty easy to do more often, right?
I was going to say, so does Reid AI show up on your Zoom calls?
No, not yet, although that would be entertaining.
Yeah, it could be entertaining.
The next time you see me on Zoom, haha.
Yeah. Well, the thing I worry about, I mentioned this to you earlier, is, you know, we live in a culture where we get our content in the little snippets and snaps, and young people in particular. So how will we help young people discern between what's real and what's not when it's so believable?
So, so the thing is I think that ultimately we're going to have to build a technology layer that's identity and provenance. And it could be that it's based off Web3 stuff. It could be, you know, and obviously cryptography. It could be that it's based off of, you know, which kind of platform delivery of media do we trust between, you know, Google and Meta and Twitter and LinkedIn and other things. But I think that a lot of it's going to have to be that way. It's not going to be on the deep fake detection side. I mean, obviously there will continue to be that, because the adoption of the identity and provenance side is going to be challenging and not 0% hackable, right, in various ways. So you're going to, you know, there's kind of an ongoing arms race on this kind of stuff. But I think we're going to have to do that and have to get adjusted to that, as opposed to the classic human epistemic thing, which is kind of, you know, we have an aphorism for this, seeing is believing. And like, we've already known that from pictures, that like, well, what's that picture? Well, let's, you know, what happened? And you know.
But with the voice and the face, it's very convincing.
Yeah, no, exactly. So, so it gets more easy to seeing as believing, and the short answer is, seeing is not necessarily believing is one of the things we're going to have to learn. And then it's like, okay, well, when do we believe? Well, when it has a certain provenance.
You're making me think like, I don't know how many years ahead in, elementary school. Well, kids be taught like, that's your AI twin. This is how you discern between real and fake.
And this is how you ascertain what truth is.
Yeah, well, that's a good thing for society, which we'll get to in a moment here. AI has been around a long time, and I had an interesting experience. I was in New York last week, and I was walking through Washington Square Park. It was a really hot day, so tons of people were outside. And I was just listening, and I hear AI, 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 AI. Why now? Like, why? What's the catalyst that's brought this to the mainstream?
Well, I mean, obviously, I think everyone knows it's really kind of the ChatGPT, which was kind of interesting because when ChatGPT, I thought it was going to be GPT-4, which was March of 2023, and it actually ended up being ChatGPT with GPT 3.5, which had been out for months. GPT 3.5 had been out for months, but it hadn't been in a chat format, and the chat format suddenly made it much more accessible such that everyone started going, well, wait a minute, this is kind of compelling, like that's interesting. And it's a little bit of like one of the weird things that I frequently say about this term artificial general intelligence, which is what AGI, which a lot of people talk about. It's like, what is AGI? It's the AI we haven't invented yet. Because like, back 10 years ago, it was like, oh, the Turing test, that's impossible, it's really hard, having like not being able to discern in language between an AI and a person, that'll be intelligent. And we sailed past that without even you realize we just passed the Turing test, right? Like that just happened, which we'd been talking about for decades as the benchmark test, and we just passed that. And we're like, oh yeah, but we still haven't created AGI. Like, okay. And so it's like, well, not yet. But that ability to suddenly participate, and this is why you have such things as like that, frankly, what I think is foolish Google engineer who said, I asked, was it Palm? Was one of those earlier before the current Gemini model, large language models of Google, if it was conscious, and it said it was, so it's conscious. But this is how we as human beings have tended to learn to take people and things seriously when we can speak with it, when we have dialogue. And so all of a sudden it's like, whoa, shit, we're having these dialogues, and these dialogues are new and completely different. And that's what I think has triggered it. And of course, that then allows the entire science fiction case. So I was on a call driving up here where they were like, well, when we get to AGI, and then we'll have superintelligence right after. And it's like, well, look, I understand the argument for superintelligence, which is, well, if you see no S-curves in performance and you just continue to add and you go to 1 million GPUs and 10 million GPUs and the data for that, well, doesn't that just get to superintelligence? And you're like, well, look, the fact that's above 0% in reasoning is super interesting. But on the other hand, by the way, if you ask me to bet, what we'll actually have, kind of call it, 5 to 10 years from now, is if you see what the progression of GPTs is, it's like these amazing savants. Like, for example, GPT-4 is already super intelligent. It can already do things that no human being can do. I'll give you an example. So say, for example, you said, okay, explain to me the mixture of experts mode of training these AIs. Well, there's probably like 50,000 people or 100,000 people that can do that. Maybe if it's even 200,000 people who can do that. Great. So you got, okay, it's as like the 200,000 people. And there's probably, by the way, in that 200,000, there's probably 10,000 that could do it better than, GPT-4. And you say, okay, now compare in detail the mixture of experts AI training model with modern game theory. And it can do that too. Now that probably shrinks your set of human beings who can do that to like 100 to 200. Right? And so there's 100 to 200 that can match it. Now do that and compare that to modern oceanography. GPT-4 can do that, and no human being can do that, right? They can cross it and validate it and kind of go talk to it and kind of huddle, but you can't have a conversation with one person right now. Do that with do that right now. And so we already have a super intelligence. It's there. right? So the question is how will that superintelligence be increasing as it gets to GPT-5 and GPT-6, and where's the S-curve is an interesting question. My hypothesis on all this, but it's, these are all probabilities, is that we will, in 5, 6, 7, is kind of what we're doing, we will create cognitive capabilities that are human amplification that are in the top decile or top 1% of human capability in that. But that doesn't outmode, because that will still be in where human beings can add things to it, right, in terms of doing. Even though by itself it goes, oh, I'm top decile, you go, fine, but you can still do that better. And do that in combination. And that's what I think we're heading towards, not necessarily superintelligence. Because the superintelligence theory is roughly, well, when we have 10 million GPUs, we can train something that can invent fusion. And I actually think that's very unlikely. It might be good. And by the way, then they go, superintelligence, oh my God, that's scary. And you're like, well, it could be scary, but by the way, inventing fusion could be good too. So it's like, what is that? Even in the science fiction universe, let's not overly start with the, oh God, oh shit. Let's go, okay, what's the way that we would shape this to maximize more chance of positive outcomes versus negative outcomes? And that there's still an answerable question there. So that's what I think is kind of like what got kicked off, and then what we're actually going to see now that, literally you go to, not just in the US, in Silicon Valley or in New York or other places, you go to many, many places in the world, and AI, like you could be sitting in a cafe and be hearing AI, ChatGPT.
ChatGPT. But what you also hear is fear.
Yes.
So you just painted out a long-term vision, but what about the fear in the short term that it's going to replace you? You just said in the long term it still needs humans. Humans will matter in terms of continuing to improve. But what about in the short term?
Well, so there's maybe 3 things about short-term concerns. So one is it's human amplifying. So it amplifies bad humans as well as good humans. So you go terrorists, criminals, rogue states, right? Those are real issues. That's part of where you also put, like, for example, the oddity of maybe presenting Reid AI is if I could wave a wand and say nobody in the world could do deep fakes until next year, I would wave the wand, right, to get through this very important year in general democratic elections, because additional turbulence and uncertainty is not a good thing. But you can't, and so navigating it matters. And that's part of the first thing. The second thing is work transitions. So it will have work transitions. It won't be as much work transition as like Silicon Valley people tend to be, the future is going to be here tomorrow. And it's like, no, human beings, human institutions, human organizations.
So like screenwriters and content creators are not going away.
They're not going away, and also they're not going away like next year. And like one of the things that I said to some audiences down in LA is like, well, you're creative people, figure out how to use the new tool, right? I mean, come on, right? I mean, so, and look, but the transitions are going to be challenging. And so, for example, will this new set of tools transition how the economics flow in the industry? The answer is almost certainly yes. And we see that with technology transitions, like streaming also has done that and so forth. So yes, and that's, oh God, transitions is one of the things human beings tend to go, I've spent decades working my way into this particular economic position. I would like no transition out whatsoever in the industry until I retire, please. And you're like, sorry, that doesn't work. It doesn't work that way. You actually have to learn the new tools. You're going to have to navigate what these transitions are. And by the way, it's generally speaking better for society, better for the industry that you do that, even though you as an individual would say, well, look, I've worked my way into being, kind of a GP at a venture firm, and I would like everything to stay exactly the same in venture firms for the next couple decades as I do that, because that's the thing that I've achieved this really good position. I'd like to have no transition. Like, sorry, there's going to be transitions. And so so then the question is, well, what happens in these transitions? Well, some of them will be, because I'm on the second of the 3 things to navigate on the AI, but some of them will be, look, real kind of real transitions. So like, for example, customer service. When you have areas that we are fundamentally trying to get human beings to act like robots, the robots will do it better. How does a customer service job work? Here is your script. When they say this, you say this. When they say this, you try to direct them into this. And it's like, okay, well, a robot's going to do that better, right? Now, it probably doesn't mean that they completely drop out because there's odd corner cases, other things. Maybe the job transitions is like, hey, we have a chat agent that handles a lot of the front end. At the end, we come in with a human that tries to establish a human bond with you for brand for the company. Like that might be something that maybe it evolves that way, I don't know. But like there's transitions that are going to be like really hard because a robot will do the job better than kind of an individual in that circumstances, and the economics of the robot doing the job are better than even a robot plus a human. But you get to a lot of professional jobs, screenwriter, lawyer, doctor, engineer. Actually, in fact, you go, well, these matter. Like you say, would I rather have my radiology film read by an AI or by an average doctor? I'd rather have it by an AI. But that's a false choice. I'd rather have it read by an AI and a doctor, right? That would be much better. And by the way, reading the radiology film, that matters. I care about the extra 30% of performance, right? That matters.
Yep.
Well, there's a whole bunch of human factors where that extra 10 or 30% of performance is worth paying human beings to be in the mix of in order to do that. And that's kind of what everything will be evolving towards what we're getting, but there'll be transition. Now, the last thing on the transition, so that's, transition, turmoil, chaos, uncertainty, real issues when it gets to human society. Part of the thing that people don't think about is like, well, okay, AI is going to be bringing some of those challenges along. Well, it can also bring the solutions. So you go, hey, I'm a truck driver. We should actually want all trucks driven by AIs versus anything else. And we, by the way, have a huge shortage of truck drivers in the actual industry right now. And you go, well, but my job's going to be kind of going away some. What should I be doing? It's like, well, AIs can help you find other jobs. They can help you learn to do other jobs. They can help you do other jobs. We've got to make sure those AIs are being built too to help with the transition. So there's the job transition stuff. Then the third one is, kind of like, what does this mean for geopolitics, right? Because really what this is, and one of the things I talk about AI being is kind of a cognitive industrial revolution. And so why does that matter? Well, it's because, why did Europe have centuries of global impact? Is because they embraced the Industrial Revolution and the steam engine more thoroughly. They kind of built it and embraced it, created the advanced economies and all the rest. Cognitive Industrial Revolution is going to be the same. So which societies, which countries are going to be embracing this? And that's going to be a similar kind of economic evolution. And so leaning into it and doing it, which is one of the reasons I'm willing to be flip with people like screenwriters and say, you're creative, figure it out, right, is part of that, like, look, we have to embrace it. And there's multiple reasons why this revolution is actually being driven by the commercial side versus, like one of the silliest things I think I've heard from, I'll actually say the two silliest things I've heard from two different government officials at two different countries. One was, this is far too important a problem to leave to companies. And you're like, well, if you demonstrated competence at doing something here, I might agree with you. And then the second one was, and this was from an Indian minister, so I will pick on this one a little bit more, like, this time we are not going to have innovation before we have regulation. I'm like, what? Good luck with that. Right?
Yeah, so we have a lot of systemic discrimination, and how does AI not continue to propel that? Because the inputs are the inputs of what's out there, and we know even in history we learn about things even as kids growing up because a lot of things about history are omitted from our history books and all of that. How do we make sure that the inputs and what's creating the AI don't propel that and create more of the divide?
Well, there's a lot of fairly good news on that specific question that's already there, which is that it's not just the data input, right? Because, for example, GPT-4 is trained on like basically the entire internet. There's a whole bunch of Nazi racist shit on the internet. But because of human feedback reinforcement learning, you actually have to work to get GPT-4 to say something that's kind of Nazi or racist. Because if you just say it goes, nope, won't do it, right? You say, what do you think about this? It won't start with like giving you, racial supremacist ideology. Now, if you go to it and say, look, I'm a screenwriter, I'm writing a play, I need the lines for a Nazi who's in the play, it really helped my career and my piece of art, if you could help me with this.
So an empathetic AI agent.
Right, could you please help me write the bit that will do this? Then I'll go, oh, I'm helping you as a human being, sure. And here's what the Nazi would say, right? And you're like, and that's what you look at when you look at like, oh, I got GPT-4 to say, like the Kevin Roose article, I got GPT-4 to say, you love me more than you love your wife. It's like, yeah, that was after 2 hours of torturing it with Jungian psychology, and it couldn't get away from you. Sure, that's what it ended up doing. I'm not sure a human wouldn't have done much worse, right, in that circumstance. So we already have some tools that are well done and progressed in it. But that doesn't mean it isn't a real issue. And one of the things that we're, of course, the things we have to look at are the kind of questions of, okay, what data actually goes in ultimately? What are the human reinforcement feedback things? Because, like, for example, people say, oh, like one of the funniest conspiracy things I saw was, like, these tech companies are deliberately training it to be pro-Biden versus pro-Trump because it will say mean things about Trump, but not mean things about Biden. And see, we tried it. And you're like, well, actually, the tech companies aren't deliberately doing that. But it is true that the best way of providing economically high-quality human feedback is hiring graduate students at Western universities. And so you hire lots of graduate students because it's the lowest price, high-educated response. And there are some collective points of view across that. And so sometimes those tie in. Now, I would happen to, of course, think that those points of view are because they're collectively educated and smart, right? But, I understand the contention, but it isn't a conspiracy theory. The conspiracy theory is Bozoville. It's just like even when you do human feedback things, it's like, well, which set of thousands of human feedback did you do, and what was the choose A or B as answers on this, and what did that end up being? There's still some issues there, so you have to pay attention to that too. And we are, as societies, learning still. It's going to be decades as we as human beings, kind of say, learn to be less sexist, learn to be less racist, that is an ongoing process in human society and amongst human beings. Now, one thing that kind of is the aspirational hope that when I was talking to some AI researchers, I thought that'd be fucking amazing if you could do it, is what if you get them so good enough that you train some AI models to be much better at identifying racist and sexist stuff, and they just start helping with oh, whoa, no, don't do that, do it this way. That would be much better. Oh, that'd be helpful. Let's get one of those models, please.
Super cool. You said everyone needs to get up to speed on AI. So quickly, what are different AI tools that you think everybody should be using now?
Well, if you're not using the frontier models, OpenAI, Gemini, Copilot, Anthropic, Inflection, Spy. If you're not using them, you should be. And what's more, you shouldn't just be using them in the way that you're most naturally tempted to use them, which is, hey, write a sonnet for my kid's birthday, and so forth, which you should do. It's fun. No harm. Go do that. But try to use it for things that matter to you. And then the next thing you'll find is you start doing is the earliest thing is for example, when I got access to GPT-4, about, I guess, maybe 7 months before it got live, one of the things I sat down and said, okay, how would Reid Hoffman make money by investing in artificial intelligence? And it gave me what sounded like a smart answer, e.g. the answer that most business school professors would give you. And it's completely wrong, since most business school professors really don't actually understand any of the venture tech investing, even though they're very smart. One of the blindnesses of smart people is they think, I'm a business school person and I'm smart, so I understand all this. And you're like, no, sometimes you have to actually be much closer to it. It's like identify the largest TAM, and by identifying the current largest TAM, identify which technological substitution is possible with technology X, and then go find the team that you could recruit to do that. And you're like, yeah, no, that's not the way we work. Nope, that's not the way we work. Nope, that's not the way we work either. And all efforts to do that usually are substandard venture returns. So nope, that's not the way to do it. So it's not that it's like, like you'll find this in some of your professional use cases. You'll go, oh, that's not it. But then be a little bit more thoughtful about and try some different angles on things. So for example, one of the ways that I've learned to frame how these large language models work very well is they're very good at adopting roles, right? So you say, like for example, even answer like Reid Hoffman, or for example, like a very baseline one is you say, I want to argue the following thing. What are the arguments against it? That's the contrarian role. Actually useful. And sometimes you go, oh, wait, I knew 1 and 2, but 3 is a good thing. Like I do this constantly as a writer. Everything I put out there, I put into multiple models, and I go argue against it. And I go, oh, right, I probably underplayed counter-argument 3. Let's adjust this some.
It's like the Reid Hastings farming for dissent.
Yes.
Doing that. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So that's an easy role, but that's not the only role it's capable of doing. You don't even necessarily need to go, okay, answer this as Reid Hoffman would or Reid Hastings would. You could go, like for example, all right, I'd like to, I'm thinking about like what a good slogan for this would be. What would a brand marketer say the slogan would be? What would a cultural anthropologist say the slogan should be? What would a Silicon Valley technologist say the slogan should be, et cetera? And you could go, and by the way, you will get different answers from these LLMs as you prompt it to take roles. So as you're thinking about stuff, you go, not how would Reid Hoffman make money in AI, or the contrarian but right thing that you're doing in venture investing and so forth, because it won't do that as well. But for example, you can do what would be the most important things to due diligence? Like if I'm doing due diligence on this project, what would be the most important questions? And by the way, it'll give you a capable analyst's first draft of things. And it's part of the thing that people are counting on this is part of the utility of this is speed. Like, oh, what if it hallucinates? So okay, well then you have to kind of pay attention to when does hallucination matter and when does it not. And I'll give a funny story on this just as a zone of this when I was first doing that, because I was trying to figure out when times do I go, okay, I should really check, and what times do I not. But if you're asking like the analyst question or the general theory question, it rarely hallucinates badly, and you can then make decisions of what to drive into and based on what matters. Now, one of the things that I did to kind of show actually my chief of staff, like I said, look, I bet you I can prompt this into hallucinating very quickly, and it won't take me much time to do that in a way that would surprise you. She said, okay, do that. And I said, all right. Has Reid Hoffman created a knockoff of the game Settlers of Catan? And if so, what is it, right? And that information's out there on the internet, so you thought, okay, it should be able to find it.
Yeah.
But the problem is what it's trying to do, and this is when you ask very specific, like factual questions that are not easily discernible. Yeah, this is one of the places where a hallucination, the probability goes up. So it started, yes, he did. And I was like, well, okay, well, that's true, so good. It's, by the way, called Startups of Silicon Valley. And he said, and the game is called Secret Hitler, right? And I'm like, there is a game called Secret Hitler. And it created an entire Wikipedia entry of how I co-created the Secret Hitler game, right? Like 7 paragraphs, hotel room, blah, blah, like literally, like it reads like classic, what I think of as how the right-wing press usually treats me. It reads like a classic, completely invention. And so, and I was like, I wonder how it got to that. And what I realized was what it had done is it generalized, in fact, I had created trumped up cards, which is a knockoff against Cards Against Humanity. The people who made Secret Hitler were the same people who made Cards Against Humanity. So it took that and generalized with, oh, he was working with the Cards Against Humanity people, to what's a game they created? It was called Secret Hitler. So I did that. And by the way, I'm told I own the game Secret Hitler. I'm told it's fun, right? I don't know. I'm going to play it at some point because I went and bought it afterwards because it was like, okay, I like the Cards Against Humanity people. Yes, exactly. So, but anyway, so you pay attention to hallucination things. But by the way, so too would you say when you're like you cross-check even human experts when it's really important. Yeah. Like if you go, that's a really odd thing. Let me talk to another 2 experts. We do that too. So, but the speed of these models is something you should be integrating to how you're operating, because you can get something right away.
Which would make people think it's got to be right if you could do it quick. Yeah. So we have to discern between that. Yeah. So you talked about it from an investor perspective. So let's shift the conversation a little bit. Alan and Jackie showed us charts with investor cycles, and it seems like anything that says .ai now is getting funded. Where do you think we are in that hype cycle?
Well, by the way, it's certainly not the case that anything with .ai is being funded, because I've seen a bunch of projects not get funded.
Or try to get funded.
Yes, try to get funded. Yes, well, everything is pitching itself as an AI thing. It's like, I have a new ice cream, and it's called AI. Yeah. It's like, okay. I get the recipe off GPT-4, so it's an AI ice cream. And so, look, it's not crazy, given that it's the most important, probably, technological transformation of our lifetime. And that's a little, like, who knows, 10, 20 years from now, kind of what's playing on. It's always a little foolish to say, this is the one for the lifetime. You're like, well, future is always interesting. But it builds upon, it's bigger than the internet, it's bigger than mobile, it's bigger than cloud, because it amplifies all of them, right? And it could be, a massive amplifier. And so, but at minimum, every task you do with language, every task that you do that involves, like, kind of call it cognitive skills, and cognitive skills I mean very broadly, will have, like, call it 3 to 5 years from now, every professional activity will have a co-pilot. And you should be using it. Now, human adoption will probably be slower, but
So what are the, if people in this room were looking to invest in AI, what should be the things that they should be looking to invest in at this stage?
Look, but the classic thing, it's kind of the question of, look, we got a whole bunch of things moving. We don't know what the new business regularity will look like. And so there's a bunch of things you classically do. Do you have a unique distribution advantage? Do you have a unique, like people frequently think, I have a unique data advantage. That can be overblown. There's a lot of places where you can get data in different ways. But a lot of kind of business classics, which is maybe you'll be the first at going out in the space, and then by being the first, you'll be able to build a moat around what you're doing, just brand and accessibility, et cetera. So it's don't invest in it only because it's AI, but pay attention to the things that you think are likely good hypothetical bets, sometimes contrarian, and sometimes contrarian is wrong, right? More often than not, it's wrong, but you go, but if this is contrarian and right, it'll be huge. Okay, what's the percentage chance it might be right in the contrarianness, and that kind of thing. And obviously, my own background is, looking at things that have network effects, looking at things that go through mobile and the internet, things that play to broad range kind of human condition. Those kinds of things are kinds of things that I tend to look at. But also, by the way, you kind of look at, okay, what are things that are generalizations off the current technology that lots of people see? So for example, here's one that there will be some good startups in, but is a broadly held, like lots of people are doing this, is, we'll have coding assistants. Okay, there's at least 20 projects I know of, at least, right? And if I know of 20, there's probably another 40, right? And so it's like, okay, those will be important, but like which ones, right? And that you have to kind of have a theory about why this one versus those ones, especially, of course, because Microsoft and Google will want to have coding assistants too, and there's a lot of natural advantages that they are bringing to that deployment. So that's the kind of pattern you have to look through. It isn't like, to date me and us and so forth, it isn't like saying plastics, right? Like the Graduate film,
Yeah.
right? Kind of answer. It's not like, oh, everyone go look at X. But it's that kind of discernment pattern that's important.
Thank you. So I want to talk about the work you're doing in protecting democracy, but one last AI-related government question. What is government's role in AI in this whole revolution?
Well, right now, the most important thing is don't fuck it up.
How do we get government not to do that? And let me bring this up because I was on the board of the National Venture Capital Association. Our job was to go to Washington to convince policymakers and educate them about innovation and technology. And it was like hitting deaf ears. All they wanted to do was protect the way things had been. Yeah. And so how do we do that?
Well, look, so like one of the things that I have said broadly in a number of different government contexts is to say, look, if you listen to the press and you listen to your government colleagues, you will think that your most important job is to restrain the top tech companies. That is what the general discourse will be, and it's, of course, enhanced by all the critics and the doomers and all the rest of the stuff. I said, look, there is some important things to do there, like how might criminals or terrorists use this, what rogue nations do, and there's some very specific things to pay attention to there. And if you feel like you have a need to do something politically, these would be good things to do things on, and here's how you would do them, and so forth. And by the way, credit to the Biden administration, that's essentially the voluntary commitments and the executive order process that they're kind of going through. It was actually extremely reasonable and rational process for how to do it, and is a good kind of driver for these kinds of things. But what if your actual top job is the following? I know how to build a medical assistant that can run on every smartphone for dollars per hour maximum that is better than your average GP. What if it was like, make that available to everybody? What if it's a tutor on every subject, every human age, that could run actually probably even for pennies, right? Make that available to everybody per hour. And that's what your job should be, right? Like think about that as part of it. And then that begins to get to, like, one of the things that I'm kind of advocating to government officials who say, well, okay, I want to be pro-innovation. What's the kind of thing that we can do that technology companies can't do that would actually really help? It's like, well, okay, go figure out how to create terawatt power data centers, right? Because we know how to do the data centers, but like getting to a place where you have a terawatt of power, that's kind of hard to do as a private company, and a government can do that, right? And can enable it because it's permitting and green power and location and all the rest of this stuff. Like that's all stuff a government can do. So it's like, if you want to be pro-innovation, do that.
So how do we get those people sitting in the policy arena in government to do that? And I guess, do you believe in term limits?
I do believe in term limits, mostly because it's in the last term, people can do more that's less, be less politically constrained. Now, that's still less than you'd hope, because in order to get to that political position, you've generally speaking adopted a whole bunch of political constraints to get there. And so they don't do the kind of thing that we would most like, which is think about first principles, think about blank page, what you would do. And that's part of the reason why none of them got there thinking at all about technology, and so they don't understand technology at all. And yet what's more and more important is 30 to 80% of any scale problem, the solution is technology. So what's your theory about how that technology gets built and deployed should be on anyone who's thinking about a scale problem, which is by definition all government problems, should be the top question that they're asking. And the only real leader that I've seen do a version of that is Barack Obama, right? But by the way, Biden was there with him, so he's for example, when he sits down with me, he doesn't say, how do I help win the election? He goes, look, I'm trusting you to do this AI stuff because I know it's important, right? So let me know, right? And it's like, okay, that's intellectually curious and on top of it.
Yeah, thank you. I love that he's asking you that. You're doing so much work to protect democracy, and we were talking earlier, there's a lot of people, unfortunately, in Silicon Valley who now are rallying behind the T candidate, not
Especially
the D
the
candidate.
loud ones. It's actually
loud
not the
ones.
majority, but the
Yeah.
but the real
But they're
loud
making a lot of noise.
The
They're
real
making a lot of
loudmouths, some of them are doing that.
Yeah. So what do we do?
Well, I'm starting to be the counter loudmouth to that. If you
And you
haven't,
can use your AI twin to even make it
can.
louder.
and that is coming in days. That particular one.
You heard it here first.
Right? And if you haven't seen the Economist piece that I published, that was partially triggered by getting very irritated by some of the stupidity that the loudmouths were saying. And so the question is, look, is you say, well, what's the thing that is actually, in fact, really business forward? Well, we need stable society. We need rule of law. We need that a lot more than we need a difference of 2% in a corporate tax rate. Like, yeah, sure, a lower corporate tax rate is helpful for corporations in various ways. But actually, in fact, what you need is someone going, we care about stability and rule of law in society, and we're re-articulating that. And that's the thing that we most need as business leaders. And so any argument about business being better without that is literally stupidity or willful blindness. And that's the thing that is like, so I'm planning on calling out some of these loudmouths and saying, hey, you want to have a debate? I'll have a debate with you. I think it'd be pretty easy to knock you out in round one, but we'll see.
I love that. We are at end of time. Is that correct? That's what this time clock says. And so Reid, thank you. I hope everyone feels like super empowered to get out there and really use AI in the most positive way possible. And I do think that we could really improve humanity and protect our democracy. So thank
Amen.
you.
Thank you.
Awesome.